Hi everyone. Today we're going to be going over chapter 3, tutorial number 2 from our textbook. So first we'll begin with the approaches you would take to sketch out this thing, and then we'll go over extruding it and actually making this a part. So to begin, for the sketch, there are many different ways you can approach this. Again, this is SolidWorks. With CAD and SolidWorks and any other program, there's basically many ways you can complete a part. I'll just be going over what I think. I'll be going through what I think is a pretty efficient way of completing completing the sketch and making this part. So let's start by first recognizing whenever you're given an origin, recognize where the origin is. So you can basically, it's like a hint as to where to start. Okay. So I'll start by drawing this line here and look for any other center lines, or think about what center lines and construction lines you would need to complete your sketch. So before you even start, just take a few minutes to think about the approach you would take to this. With a sketch like this, something so symmetrical, you would perfectly think immediately about mirroring. You see so many shapes of the same radius, because when especially when it's like this, you can basically assume that these circles are the same radius and the same distance apart. The number 7 here actually is the result of the patterning feature in SolidWorks. So this basically says there are 7 of these. This shape is patterned 7 times. So this circle is patterned 7 times. So 1, 2, including itself. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, I can count. Cool. So before we even start, take a few minutes to think about what construction lines you'll need, what center lines you will need, what big sketch features, what big sketch tools you will need. So in this case, you'll think about probably arc for these, patterning for these, and then mirroring everything at the end when everything is fully defined. So let's start by just creating the outer outline, the outline. Let's start by creating the outline. So the bottom here is 120 divided by 2, that's 60. 60 over, that is 20 up. Start a sketch. Which plane you choose doesn't really matter. I prefer the right plane or the front plane, just not the top plane for this. There'll be cases where top plane is preferred, and that's for later on. But that's for later on. So again, I think we mentioned 60. Oh, before we even start, make sure the units of your page, of your environment is in the proper one. So make sure it's not in inches. Otherwise, you can have a really, really rough day when you realize halfway through your exam that you're in the wrong units, because the difference is pretty big. Between an inch and a millimeter, it's just going to screw up your entire sketch essentially. So make sure it's in the right units before you start. And I totally forgot about my own rule even. Always start by making your center lines and your construction lines. So in this case, I'll do a center line. Again, you can do center line or construction line. They're about the same, but SolidWorks recognizes center lines as like a line that you would use to mirror things. So I guess in this case, when you have the explicit intention of mirroring something using that line, use a center line. Otherwise, you can use construction lines. Either way, they don't count as part of your sketch, but you can still make references to it. You can still relate things to these lines. So let's finally get started with the first line. That's 60. And 60 over 20 up. All right, escape. Perfect. Now, do you see where the dimension placements here? You want to drag these out perfectly and space them out so you don't confuse these with your actual sketch lines. Sometimes these lines add up and they can become pretty thick, and you might forget to add an actual sketch line just because one of these lines is giving an illusion that there is a sketch line there. So you want to pull these out so it's not interfering with your actual sketch. And plus it looks much nicer like this. So it serves two purposes. Let's see how far this goes out. 168, so you gotta do some math here. 168 minus 120. So to get this distance times 2, right? So you divide that by 2. So 160 minus 120 is 48, divided by 2 is 24. So this is 24 over. And this arc here is 16. All right. So 24 over. And then 16 for the arc. So a trick for the arc, a neat trick for the arc is if you pull straight outwards and curve it and curve your cursor. If you go straight, So once it starts once it knows that you want an arc, it's hard to change back. But if you start over, if you're, for example, let's pretend we haven't even drawn that line, okay? You can draw basically the entire thing here, the entire part here, without having to change over to an arc. So you click where you want to start, you move out a little bit, choose your dimension, 24, enter. So you're still in the line tool. However, this is only a straight line, right? If you want a curved arc, you're going to have to pull your cursor back to the starting point and drag out slowly and then curve towards the direction you want the arc to form. So in this case, I want the arc to form this way, and they can basically line this point up with, make sure it's vertical to the bottom point, and then you fix that to dimension, use dimension to keep that in place. I choose 16. And then see, now it's back to a line. So you're still in the line tool, but SOLIDWORKS can tell by the motion that you just did, by dragging it out and then up slowly, that you wanted an arc in that case. But it's still defaulted to a line tool once you finish that arc. So again, same distance, 24. And then going up, I think it was 80. Okay, and then out 24. Again, we can always go back to change that distance if it was wrong. 24. See, notice how I finished all this in using one tool, using one continuous motion pretty much. So I can go back to this point, drag out, up, one more arc, make sure it lines up. Do you see the dotted line? Boom, boom. The dotted line right below my cursor, the pencil. That's basically saying it's lining up with the bottom, which you want in this case. And then you set dimension again, enter. Out, 24, 14. Okay, I clicked the wrong number, but up by a certain distance, over by a certain distance. All right, so this is like the rough shape of it. Sometimes it's a good idea to just get a rough shape and then dimension it to become the right shape. So it's, again, there's been different ways of doing the sketch. It's just how you prefer. It's just what you prefer and what you think is the easiest for yourself. Excuse me. So let's see if this is correct. Okay, so it is 80. So we finished this part, went up, over, back, up, over, back, up. Okay, so how, what's the height of this? 18, so it's not 20. It's not the same as the bottom. Top is 18. So because we haven't dimensioned this yet, we can add 18 here. All right, so notice how this line and this line, I said 14. I set this to 14 millimeters instead of 24 due to a typo. So we changed that. Okay, now this is much better. Okay, organize your dimensions so it doesn't get in the way of your drawing. This point, Okay, so if you're ever confused about why your shape is not fully defined, just click on it and drag it around, and you'll see in what way you'll need to constrain your sketch with that part of the sketch. So in this case, if you go back to the sketch, you want this line to be collinear with this line. Collinear as in meaning that you want it to be on the same infinite line. So select this line, control, left click on the other line that you want the relationship to be the relation to be set with. And you hit collinear, boom. Now this is fully defined. Now, what's wrong with this? Let's see. If you select the arc, all the relations that are associated with the arc will pop up as green. So as you can see here, this here is tangent, and that is what you want in this case, because if you go back to the picture, this is essentially tangent with the center point directly vertically constrained with the two outer points. So essentially you're going from a straight line to a curve, to a perfect curve, basically what tangent is. So you select those two, left click, hold down control, left click, tangent. All right. So if you're confused as to why this is still not fully defined, drag it. Okay. Okay, let's drag that. So it's moving in and out, that's for sure. Okay, let's fix that first. So this line here, the distance between that line and the center line is not fixed. So that's why it's moving back and forth, back and forth. We need to dimension it. Click that, click that. And that distance is also 60. Same as the bottom. And that just fixed almost everything. You see this little one blue dot here? You have to be careful. You have to be sort of attentive to these things. If you ever need to make sure, if you ever want to make sure whether or not your sketch is fully defined, just look under here and you'll see either fully defined or underdefined or overdefined. You want to have a fully defined sketch. So in this case, this is underdefined, and that's because there's a blue dot here that's not fully constrained. But going back to this measurement of 60, instead of putting, since these two measurements are the same, you can delete one of them actually. Left click, control, left click, hold down control, left click on the other one, set these two to be equal to each other. Now there are two lines with equal lengths. Now, the thing can still move because this point here, unlike this point, is not coincident with anything. This point is coincident with the origin and the center line. We want this point to also be coincident with the center line. Obviously, it can be coincident to the origin because it's down here, but you want it to be in the same like vertical, same vertical infinite line, same vertical infinite line as this point here. So you can either select those two points. Select left click that point, hold down control, left click this point, and then hit vertical. That works too. Or you can hit this point here, click this center line, and hit coincident. That will also fully define everything. So as you can see here, down here, it says fully defined. That's what you want. Something else you can do, because why not, is that because these two arcs are the same radius, you can delete one of them actually. You didn't have to dimension it if you you didn't have to dimension it. You could have basically constrained it by setting a relation between those two arcs, making them equal to each other. That would also fully define these two arcs. Again, there are many different ways you can do one task in CAD. So it's all up to what you prefer and I guess your style. Same with here, 24 and 24. that's a repeat, right? You can keep the dimensions there. That's completely fine. But you can also, if you prefer, to left click on that, hold down Control, and then left click on this, and then set it equal to each other. It does the same thing. They both are fixed at a length of 24 millimeters. All right, let's get going with the patterning now. Okay, perfect. So as you can see, even though the center line is not fully constrained, it still says that if the sketch is fully defined. That's because the center line is not part of the sketch. It's just a reference that your sketch can rely on. All right, so now let's take care of the circle, right? I believe it was a radius of 16. Okay, let us check. So, okay, diameter of 16, sorry, my bad. Diameter of 16, it's 26 from the middle and 16 from the bottom. Okay, let's do that. 26 from the middle. Again, keep your dimensions organized so it doesn't become cluttered, and you can figure out which dimensions belong to which line. And then 16 from the bottom. 16 from the bottom. Okay, so now everything is fully defined once again. Once the circle is defined, similar to how you will want to fully define everything first before you mirror it across the line, you also want to at least fully define the shape that you are patterning. Otherwise, all of your pattern features won't be fully defined. So fully define the thing you want to pattern first before you pattern that shape. So in this case, the circle is fully defined, then we pattern it. You can either select the circle first and then hit pattern, or you can hit linear pattern and then go down, select the entities to pattern, hit circle. So you can either do that or hit the circle and then hit pattern. So now you can see that the pattern direction is this way, but we don't want it to go that way, right? We want it to go up. So you want to go into here, because look at the where my mouse is at right now. It's hovering this thing called angle, right? It's currently at 0 degrees. As you can see, as I move this arrow, as I move this direction, the angle changes. So if it's not in the right direction, if it's not in the direction that you prefer, you can set a degree, an angle offset. In this case, I want it to be 9 degrees from where it started. So now it's facing upwards. This is what you want. Now this is number of instances. This is a number of times you want to, this is number of shapes that you want to have at the end after patterning. So this number will include your original shape. Since you want to have 7 circles, I'm going to increase the number to 7. So because it includes the original shape, this number here should be 7. The result will be 7 circles. And as we counted earlier, I think, it is 7. As you can see, the number 7 here also says that. Now let's go back to the sketch again. And notice the spacing between the center, from center point to center point, 24. And then, yep, that should be all we need actually. So 24, right? That's where you put it in this. That's where you put the distance from center to center in this space called spacing, in this input box called spacing. So you put 24, and then you click like the edge or the middle to get it to load. And now you have a preview. So this looks basically the same, because it is the same as what the question is asking you. So this is satisfactory. However, before you hit check, you want to make sure this box is checked. If you don't check this box, you won't get a fully defined, circles after you patterned the circle. So if you hit check without checking this box, dimension X spacing, if you just complete your shape now, notice how all these circles are just whoops, are blue. First of all, they're all blue, and they're not fixed in terms of the spacing. So instead of having to do this to fix all of your patterned, to fix all of your pattern shapes, you could have just hit dimension X spacing to instantly have this be fixed. So again, patterning is what you would do when there are multiple copies of a shape in a certain direction. You can also do this in two directions, and that would give you like if you want to do 2 rows of this, if you want to do 2 rows of 7, you could have patterned 1 over and then 7 up. So it would be a pattern of 2 rows, 2 columns and 7 rows of circles. And again, you can set the spacing from center to center for that case. So again, it's up to you, but this is much easier than having to create 7 individual circles and then individually dimension them. That would take at least 20 minutes, and you don't have that much time for your exams or quizzes. And it's also just a waste of time in general. So this is a much simpler way. So once you're done with everything and you see that everything's fully defined, then your last step, most likely your last step, should be to mirror. So you can either select everything, deselect, oh, whoops. So you can hold down Control to select and deselect something. So I don't want to mirror the mirror line. That doesn't really make sense, right? But everything else, I'm fine with just mirroring over the center line. So I'll deselect the center line, but keep everything else selected. And then I'll hit mirror. And this will bring up the mirror feature. You go down, you scroll down. Make sure the box that says copy is checked. And then you select the mirror about input box, not the, when you select something, it becomes blue. Make sure you are not selecting this box when you're choosing the center line. You click the mirror about input box, and then you click the center line to get the other, to make sure it's mirrored across that line. So you can choose different lines if you want for different cases. So if I didn't want to go over the center line for some reason, if I want to go over this line, there you go. If you want to mirror over this line for some random reason, you can also choose to mirror over this line. But again, it's up to you. So in this case, I want to mirror over this line here. Okay, perfect. So you hit this line and almost everything is mirrored. Before you hit check, before you hit the check button, make sure everything you want to mirror is selected. Do you see this gap here? If you just mirror this right now, you're going to have to fill that in. So just make sure, like, while you're at it, it's easier for you to just go back to this box and select this part. Notice how now it's a fully contained shape. So make sure if you're missing something, just go back in to this, select the entities to mirrors input box, and choose the missing line. So now you're all good and ready to just hit check. And the result of mirroring a fully defined sketch over a center line is a fully defined sketch. And this is your completed sketch. So this is essentially, this would essentially give you full points for the sketch portion of this assignment, or of the assignment, of any assignment. However, the homework also mentions that you have to extrude this whole thing by 10 millimeters, right? So some of you guys, when extruding, did not extrude these individual, did extrude these individual circles. So this is the shape that we were looking for. This is a part that we were looking for. But some of you had some challenge with that, some challenges with that. So instead of extruding just the space between the circle and the outer sketch, you extruded everything. So like this. This will cause you to lose points because anytime when there's a circle, anytime when there's a shape within a shape, you can assume that we want the inner shapes to be punched out. We want them to be holes. We want them to be like not extruded, excluded from the extrusion. So we want the inner shapes to be excluded from the extrusion most of the time, unless we explicitly state that it's not. So if this ever happens and you hit the check button by accident, you just have to right click on the feature in the feature tree, in the feature manager design tree. Just right click. You can always go back in and edit the feature. That applies to any other features that you see above. Most of these we'll learn later on. So you can change your fillets, you can change your chamfers, change your linear patterns, change your extruded bosses, revolved bosses, and even more. So go back in, edit. Now select the selected contours input box, and sometimes you don't have to deselect, sometimes you do. It depends on how you did your sketch. But in this case, we're going to have to deselect all of these. Well, we have to select them essentially to exclude them. That's why it's so confusing when I say deselect, but it's more so like excluding them. But essentially you have to select them to exclude them. So once the preview looks okay, you hit check and done. This is what you want. Yeah, if you submit this in the sketch that we did previously, you'll pretty much get full points. Something cool is that you can left click or right click your sketch and either hide or show. If you hide your sketch is now missing from the parts. Right click, show, your sketch shows up. So this is useful if you ever want to apply multiple features to your sketch. So I already extruded my sketch once, right? Usually after I extrude my sketch once, the sketch automatically hides itself. You're going to have to go in and show it. So after my extrusion, the part will look like this. The sketch will disappear. You can't choose a sketch anymore. If you want to extrude more of the sketch, you can't select it anymore. It's missing. So you want to go back in, hit left click or right click on the sketch, hit show. Once you have the sketch showing, it's very, very faint, but if you hover over it, it'll show you the sketch, right? You can see the center line. Now you can go back in and extrude more of the shape for whatever reason. Obviously, this is not the best example for this, but if, let's say you want to make sure this is selected to select more shapes. Let's say you want to extrude these 4 circles the other direction. So we reverse the direction, and we get this shape. So if this was the part that we were looking for on an exam, you're going to have to use the same sketch. Well, you could use the same sketch, you don't have to, but it's easier if you use the same sketch, but apply 2 different extrude features to that sketch, to that one sketch. So once this is shown, you can then use that to make your second extrusion to get this funky shape. And if it bothers you, you can always just hide the sketch again. And now everything looks clean and definitely ready for submission and ready to get your perfect score. I think that is all I wanted to show you guys. Hope this helped a little bit. And good luck on the exam if you watch this before the exam. So take care, guys.